The sky burned with fire as enemy ships rained down their weapons. The alien colony was in chaos. Families rushing, soldiers shouting, ships lifting off into the dark clouds. Everyone was trying to escape before the enemy forces landed. Among the noise and fear, one girl sat on the ground, her legs refusing to move. Her name was Lyra. She had been born different, her legs weak and unable to carry her weight. She could not run. She could not climb into the evacuation ships. She could only watch. Her people looked at her with pity, some with shame, others with coldness. She will only slow us down. One of the leaders said, "Leave her. We cannot risk everyone for one broken life." And so they left. One by one, the ships rose into the smoky sky. Lyra stretched out her hand, hoping someone would pull her aboard. But the last soldier turned his back, the ramp closed, and the ship was gone. The air was filled with silence now. Silence broken only by the distant roar of enemy engines. Lyra's heart felt heavy, not from fear of death, but from the pain of being abandoned by her own blood. She whispered to herself, "They left me because I cannot walk." Tears slid down her cheeks, but she did not scream. She knew screaming would only bring death faster. As the ground trembled with the landing of enemy machines, a shadow moved behind her. It was not one of her people. It was a human, tall and scarred, wearing broken armor and carrying a rifle. His name was Daniel, a soldier from the human fleet sent to help the aliens evacuate. He had stayed behind to cover their escape, but now he saw her, sitting alone. He stared at her for a moment, his eyes narrowing as if fighting an inner battle. He could leave, he could run, he could survive, but instead he walked to her, knelt down, and said in a calm but firm voice, "You are not staying here." Lyra looked at him in shock, her voice trembling. Why? Why would you help me? Even my own people do not want me." Daniel checked his rifle, then looked her straight in the eye. "Because I am human, and humans do not abandon." Before she could reply, he lifted her into his arms. She gasped, not used to such strength, not used to being carried like she mattered. The sound of enemy drones filled the air, their red eyes scanning the streets. Daniel pressed his back against the broken wall of a ruined house, holding her tightly. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his breath calm, though his heart pounded like thunder. The drones passed, their engines humming like swarms of insects. Lyra clutched his armor, afraid her heartbeat would give them away. When the danger faded, Daniel started moving one careful step at a time. He carried her through fire and smoke, through the ruins of her home. Every corner they turned, he expected death, but he never slowed. Lyra whispered, "You can leave me. I am nothing. You will die because of me." He shook his head firmly. "No, you are someone, and I will not leave you." The ground shook again as enemy forces landed in full. Daniel pushed into an alley, his eyes sharp, his arms aching from her weight, but never letting go. They reached an old supply station, the doors half broken. He set her down gently, his eyes scanning the room for danger. "Why? Why are you doing this?" she asked again, her voice weak. He looked at her with a tired smile. "Because sometimes one life means more than an army." Outside, enemy soldiers marched, their heavy boots echoing across the empty streets. Inside, Daniel pulled out a small beacon, broken, sparks flashing. He cursed under his breath. "If this worked, I could call for extraction." Lyra touched his hand gently. "There's another way, underground tunnels. I know them. I used to sit and watch them when others ignored me." He looked at her with surprise. "Then you are not useless." Her lips trembled, but they said I was. Daniel tightened his grip on his rifle. They were wrong. The night grew darker as enemy patrols filled the streets. Daniel lifted her again, his muscles screaming, but his will stronger. Step by step, he carried her into the tunnel she described. The sound of dripping water echoed around them, shadows stretching across the stone walls. Above, the enemy spread their net. Below, the human and the abandoned girl slipped deeper into darkness. Lyra closed her eyes, still hearing the words of her people in her head. "Leave her. She will only slow us down. But now another voice spoke, steady and strong. You are not staying here. And for the first time in her life, she believed it. The tunnels were cold and damp, water dripping from cracked ceilings, the air thick with dust. Daniel carried Lyra carefully, his boots splashing in shallow pools as he searched for safe ground. She clung to his neck, her eyes wide, listening to the distant thuds of enemy machines above. Every sound echoed like a warning. Every shadow felt like a trap, but the human never slowed. They reached a broken chamber deep underground, an old station long forgotten by her people. Rusty metal doors leaned against the walls, old lamps flickered weakly, and broken crates lay scattered on the floor. Daniel lowered her gently onto a dry corner, brushing dirt away so she could rest. His chest rose and fell heavily, his body exhausted, but his eyes still sharp with determination. You should have left me, she whispered, her voice soft but heavy with guilt. You are strong, you can fight, but I will only slow you. Daniel crouched down in front of her, his face hard, his tone steady. Listen to me. I made a promise the moment I saw you. I will not abandon you. Not to them, not to death. She shook her head, tears building in her eyes. But why me? Even my own people do not care. He tightened his grip on his rifle, looking into the dark tunnel as if daring it to challenge him. Because you are alive, and that is enough. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of water drops. Then, faintly, they both heard it. The metallic click of enemy drones moving closer, their scanners buzzing in the distance. Daniel quickly moved to the entrance of the chamber, setting small traps with wires and old explosives he had scavenged. Lyra watched, her heart racing, afraid every second would be their last. He worked fast, his hands steady, his eyes scanning the shadows. When he finished, he sat beside her, rifle across his lap. We wait. If they come, we fight. Her eyes studied his face, the scars across his skin, the tired look in his eyes. Why do humans fight so much for others? She asked, almost in wonder. We abandon the weak, but you carry them. Daniel gave a small smile, though there was no joy in it, only steel. Because weakness is not the end, sometimes the weak hold the answers the strong cannot see. Her chest tightened at his words, a strange warmth filling her heart, something she had never felt before. For the first time, she felt she was not a burden, but someone worth protecting. The sound of drones grew louder, their red lights flashing in the tunnel's distance. Daniel motioned for silence, his body tense, every muscle ready. The machines crawled closer, their metal legs clicking against stone. One of them scanned the chamber, the red beam brushing over the wall. Lyra held her breath, praying the traps would hold, praying Daniel would not have to fight. Then a spark, a flash, and an explosion echoed through the tunnels. The drone shattered into pieces, smoke filling the air, the others retreating in confusion. Daniel pulled her close, shielding her with his body as dust rained from the ceiling. When the noise faded, he checked her quickly, his hands rough but gentle. Are you hurt? He asked firmly, his eyes scanning her. She shook her head slowly, still stunned. No, but you risked everything for me. He nodded once, simply, I told you, I will not leave you, not ever. They stayed there in silence, the weight of his words sinking deep. For Lyra, those words were more powerful than any weapon. Her own people had looked at her as a weakness, as dead weight. But this human, this stranger, carried her like she was hope itself. She turned her head toward him, her voice shaking but strong. Then I promise too, I will not let you fight alone. If I cannot walk, I can still guide you. I know these tunnels better than anyone. Daniel looked at her, surprised by the strength in her voice. A small nod came from him, respect in his eyes. Then we survived together. Above them, the sound of engines grew louder, enemy ships flooding the sky. But deep below, in the darkness of the tunnels, a promise had been made. A promise between a human who refused to abandon and an alien who refused to give up. And that promise would change the fate of more than just the two of them. The tunnels stretched endlessly, twisting like veins beneath the ruined city. Daniel moved carefully, carrying Lyra in his arms, his rifle slung over his shoulder. Every step echoed against the stone, every sound making them fear discovery. Above, the rumble of enemy patrols shook the ground, their machines hunting relentlessly. Lyra pointed toward a narrow passage on the left, her voice soft. That way, it leads deeper, it connects to an old station. Maybe we can hide there. Daniel nodded. His face calm, though sweat ran down his brow, his body aching from the weight he carried. He did not complain, he did not slow. His focus was survival, hers and his. The passage grew tighter, forcing him to bend as he moved. Rats scattered at their approach. Water dripped steadily from cracks above. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the earth itself pressed down on them. They reached the station, a vast hollow chamber buried in darkness. Rusty tracks stretched across the floor. Old transport machines lay broken and forgotten. Daniel set her down gently on a pile of cloth he found among the debris. He checked his rifle, counting the last of his ammunition, and frowned. Only a few rounds remained, not enough for a long fight. His eyes scanned the shadows, searching for dangers, but only silence surrounded them. Lyra watched him work, her heart filled with both fear and awe. "How can you stay so calm?" she whispered. "We are trapped. Enemies above. Nowhere to run." Daniel sat beside her, his voice low and steady. "Calm is a choice. Fear does nothing but blind us. If I lose focus, we both die." She lowered her gaze, ashamed. "I've always been afraid. Even before this war, afraid because I could not walk, afraid because no one wanted me." He turned to her, his eyes sharp but kind. "Do not mistake being left behind for being worthless. You see more than they ever did. You notice paths, you know secrets. You're not weak, not here, not now." His words struck her like a spark in the dark. For the first time, she felt her knowledge mattered. Her memories of these tunnels had value. She nodded slowly, determination building inside her. "Then I will guide you. I know more tunnels. Some lead beyond the city, some to the enemy's camps. I will help you." Daniel allowed a small smile, though the weight of danger still pressed on him. "Good. Then we have a plan." As they spoke, a faint whirring sound echoed from the far end of the station. Daniel's head snapped up, his rifle raised, eyes narrowing. Small red lights flickered in the dark, enemy drones moving through the tunnels. He cursed under his breath, quickly setting Lyra behind an overturned machine. The drones scanned the chamber, their beams sweeping like knives of light. Daniel pulled out one of his last grenades, the pin clicking softly. "Stay down," he whispered, then hurled it into the swarm. The explosion thundered through the station, sparks and flames scattering metal. Shattered drones fell, but more soon followed, their mechanical screeches echoing like an alarm. Daniel fired, each shot echoing loudly, shells clattering to the ground. His rifle grew hot, his ammo dwindling, but his stance never wavered. Lyra watched, terror filling her, yet she could not look away. He fought not for himself, but for her, every movement a shield, every shot a promise. Finally, silence returned, the last drone sparking as it fell. Daniel lowered his rifle, chest heaving, blood dripping from a wound on his arm. Lyra crawled to him quickly, fear in her voice. "You are hurt." He shook his head, tightening a strip of cloth around the wound. "I've been hurt before. This will not stop me." She touched his arm gently, her voice trembling. "You risked everything again for me." He met her eyes, steady, unwavering. "I told you, I made a promise, I will not abandon you." They rested for a moment, the air thick with smoke, the ground littered with broken machines. Daniel sat beside her, exhaustion heavy, but his spirit unbroken. Lyra leaned closer, whispering, "If we're to survive, we need more than hiding. We need a way to fight back. My people will not return, but maybe we can strike the enemy from here." Daniel raised an eyebrow, his voice calm. You have an idea? She nodded slowly, determination hardening her voice. Yes, I know their weakness, something they do not want anyone to know. Her words hung in the air like a blade, sharp with secrets. Daniel studied her closely, understanding dawning in his eyes. This girl, abandoned and forgotten, was not just a survivor. She was holding knowledge that could change everything. And now, with his promise binding them, with her guidance leading them, an escape plan was no longer just survival. It was the beginning of something greater. The broken station was silent after the battle, smoke drifting through the cracked ceiling, sparks still hissing from destroyed drones. Daniel sat near the shadows, his rifle resting across his knees, his wound bandaged but throbbing with pain. Lyra stayed close, her hands trembling as she tried to gather courage, her heart heavy with something she had never shared before. The human's promise had given her strength, but also brought back memories she had buried deep, memories that could not stay hidden any longer. Daniel, she whispered, her voice low, there is something you must know, something even my people feared to speak. He turned to her, eyes steady, always sharp. Tell me. She hesitated, her breath catching. They did not leave me behind only because of my legs. They left me because of what I discovered, because I knew something dangerous. Daniel leaned closer, his expression unreadable, but his attention absolute. What did you discover? Her hands curled into fists as she remembered. I once worked in the archives before the war, before the attacks. I studied the enemy's records, their biology, their weaknesses. I learned something they tried to erase, something my people thought was madness. Her eyes met his, shining with both fear and fire. The enemy is not invincible. Their bodies depend on a single strain, a flaw in their design. If it is destroyed, their whole army collapses. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his soldier's mind racing. Why would your people ignore that? Why would they abandon you for knowing it? Her voice broke, trembling, because they were afraid that if I spoke, the enemy would kill us all. So they silenced me. They told me I was nothing. They told me I imagined it. And when the invasion came, they chose to let me die rather than risk the truth spreading. For a long moment, only silence filled the chamber, the weight of her confession pressing down like stone. Daniel finally spoke, his tone calm but fierce. Then they were fools. They threw away their only chance, but you are still here, and now I know too, this secret will not die. Lyra stared at him, tears forming. But even if it is true, what can we do? You and I alone against their army. Daniel loaded the last of his ammo, his hands steady despite exhaustion. One secret is enough to start a war. One truth can burn an empire. Before he could say more, the tunnels shook, dust raining from the ceiling. Enemy soldiers were near, heavy footsteps echoing through the dark, their mechanical voices calling commands. Lyra's body froze, fear returning. They found us. Daniel pulled her close, moving her behind cover, his voice sharp but steady. Stay quiet, trust me. The soldiers entered the station, tall armored figures with glowing eyes, scanning the wreckage. Daniel's traps had already been used, his ammo nearly gone, yet he did not falter. He whispered, if they take you, the secret dies. If they take me, the promise breaks. We cannot let that happen. Her eyes widened, realizing the truth. You mean to fight them all? He gave a grim smile. If I must. The soldiers advanced, weapons raised, their lights sweeping across the chamber. Daniel fired a single shot. The echo thundered, and chaos followed. Bullets and beams lit the station, stone cracking, sparks flying. Daniel fought like a storm, each movement precise, each shot a shield between Lyra and death. But there were too many, their shadows closing in, their voices like iron. Lyra pressed her hands to her mouth, watching the human stand against impossible odds. Her chest ached, guilt and fire burning together. I cannot just watch, she whispered to herself. Then she remembered the old control panel buried under dust near the far wall, a system connected to the city's forgotten power grid. With shaking hands, she crawled toward it. ignoring the pain of stone cutting her skin. Her mind raced, recalling every detail she had studied in the archives, every hidden line of code. If I cannot fight with legs, I will fight with knowledge, she told herself. The enemy soldiers cornered Daniel, his rifle empty, his blade drawn, his breath ragged. Still he stood tall, refusing to fall, his eyes never leaving her, as if telling her silently, I promised, I will not leave you. At the same moment, Lyra's fingers slammed the controls, sparks shot from the wires, and an old surge of energy roared through the tunnels. Lights flickered, machines groaned awake, and then a blast of power exploded from the walls, hurling soldiers into fire and smoke. Daniel staggered, stunned by the sudden force, then saw her at the console, her face fierce, her body glowing with determination. You did this, he whispered in disbelief. She nodded, breathless. I told you. I know their weakness. I will not let your promise be in vain. Smoke filled the chamber, the remaining soldiers retreating, their voices angry and broken. Daniel limped toward her, lifting her into his arms on. The tunnel shook with every echo of the blast, smoke curling upward as broken machines sparked on the floor. Daniel carried Lyra through the dust, his arm bleeding, his steps uneven, but his grip on her never faltering. Behind them, the surviving soldiers regrouped, their voices sharp, their heavy boots pounding against the stone. The hunt had begun, and this time the enemy would not stop until both were dead. Faster, Lyra whispered, guilt and fear heavy in her voice. You are hurt. You cannot fight them all. Daniel's jaw tightened, his breath rough, but his voice steady. Then I will die before I let them take you. He pressed forward into the darkness, his body straining, every step powered by will alone. The tunnels twisted like a maze, but Lyra guided him, pointing with trembling hands toward paths only she knew. They do not patrol the lower levels. Go down here, she urged, leading him to a crumbling stairwell. He obeyed without question, trusting her knowledge more than his own strength. The stairwell collapsed behind them as enemy grenades exploded above, the shockwave throwing Daniel forward. He shielded Lyra with his body, crashing against the stone, his breath knocked out, but his arms still wrapped around her. Rubble rained down, fire licking the walls, the air thick with smoke and blood. Daniel pushed himself up, coughing, his body trembling, but he refused to let go. Every muscle screamed, every wound burned, but his promise burned hotter. The enemy followed, their armored figures dropping into the lower tunnels, weapons glowing. Daniel set Lyra down gently against a wall, his voice low but fierce. Stay behind me. Whatever happens, do not give up. She grabbed his arm, her eyes desperate. You will be killed. He pulled his blade from its sheath, his voice like iron. Then I will take as many of them as I can with me. The clash came in fire and blood. Daniel charged into the first soldier, blade striking sparks against metal armor. He moved like a storm, cutting, striking, his body a wall between Lyra and death. Blasts from enemy rifles lit the darkness, stone shattered, sparks flew, blood splattered across the floor. He roared with each strike, his humanity burning brighter than the machines he fought. But the enemy was endless, each one stronger than the last, their voices mechanical and cold. Lyra's chest ached as she watched him fight, her heart breaking with every wound he took. She wanted to scream, to stand, to fight beside him, but her legs betrayed her, as always. Her mind raced instead, searching for something, anything that could turn the tide. Her eyes fell on a broken console half buried in rubble, wires still glowing faintly. She dragged herself toward it, ignoring the sharp stones that cut her hands. Every crawl forward was agony, but she moved anyway, whispering, I will not let him fight alone. Daniel cut down another soldier, his blade dripping, his body staggering, his breaths ragged. The last of his strength bled from him, but still he stood. One soldier raised its weapon, aiming at his chest. Before it could fire, the console sparked to life under Lyra's hands. She screamed, pouring all her memory into the system, hacking through ancient circuits. A surge of power roared through the tunnels, the lights above shattering, the ground trembling. An old defense system awoke, hidden for centuries, forgotten by her people. Metal doors slammed down across passages, sealing the enemy inside. Turrets unfolded from the ceiling, firing bursts of fire into the soldiers. The air filled with explosions, the tunnel lit in red and gold as machines tore each other apart. Daniel staggered back, his body near collapse, staring at the storm Lyra had unleashed. She turned her head toward him, blood on her lips, fire in her eyes. I told you I would not let you fight alone. The battle ended in silence, smoke rising, the smell of blood and burning metal thick in the air. Daniel limped toward her, falling to his knees, his blade slipping from his hand. His chest heaved as he looked at her, awe in his tired eyes. You saved us, he whispered, his voice rough but full of respect. She shook her head weakly. No, you saved me first. I only kept the promise. But their victory was fragile. The sound of distant footsteps echoed again, more enemies approaching. They had survived the fire and the blood, but the war was far from over. And as Daniel lifted her once more, both knew the fight had only just begun. The tunnels were a graveyard now, filled with smoke, broken machines, and the echo of battles fought. Daniel carried Lyra through the debris, his steps uneven, his wounds heavy, but his arms unyielding. Every breath was fire in his chest, but he would not stop, not while she still breathed. Above them, the enemy's voices echoed through the stone, mechanical and merciless, hunting them without pause. Lyra pressed her hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat pounding like a drum of war. You cannot go on like this, she whispered, her voice filled with worry. If you fall, both of us are lost. Daniel gave her a faint smile, though his eyes burned with exhaustion. If I fall, it will be standing, not crawling, and not abandoning. His words silenced her protests, but her heart ached with guilt. She wished more than anything that her legs would move, that she could stand beside him, not just be carried. They reached the edge of the tunnels, a shattered cliffside where the underground ended in a jagged drop. The world beyond stretched into a burning wasteland, the sky painted red with fire and smoke. Daniel set her down against a stone pillar, his hands trembling as he raised his rifle once more. This is where it ends, he said calmly, though his body swayed from fatigue. They will come, and we will fight together. Lyra shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. You should leave me. You can still climb, still escape. I will only hold you down. Daniel crouched in front of her, his voice sharp and fierce. Do not say that. Not after everything. I promised I would not abandon you. And I will not. Not now, not ever. She reached out and grabbed his arm, her voice trembling. Then let me promise too, if you fight, I stay. If you bleed, I bleed. I will not abandon you either. Their eyes locked, a vow unspoken but stronger than steel. The sound of boots and machines grew louder, the enemy emerging from the tunnels like shadows of death. Their glowing eyes pierced the smoke, their weapons charged, their steps heavy. Daniel rose, his rifle raised, his blade at his side, his stance wide and unbroken. Lyra pressed her hands against the ground, forcing herself upright as much as she could, her body weak but her voice strong. You are not alone, she whispered, determination hardening her tone. You carried me. Now I will carry you in the way I can. The enemy surrounded them, lines of armored soldiers closing in from every direction. Daniel fired, the last of his rounds cracking through the air, each shot precise, each one buying them a breath longer. When the rifle clicked empty, he dropped it without hesitation, drawing his blade. Steel clashed with metal. Sparks flew, his arms a blur of strikes, his roar echoing against the cliffs. Every cut came with pain. Every swing drained his life, but he stood like a wall of fire. Lyra, her body pressed against the console of a broken comms device near the cliff, worked desperately. Her fingers flew over shattered circuits, her knowledge from the archives guiding her. "I can send a signal," she muttered through clenched teeth. "If I can fix this, someone will hear, someone will come." Daniel fought beside her, his back to the cliff, his body battered, his blood staining the stone. But his voice rang steady. "Do it, Lyra. Call them. If they come too late, then at least you will live, and the secret will live." She glanced at him, her heart twisting. "I told you, I will not abandon you." The console sparked, a light flickering, faint but alive. The signal pulsed into the sky, a desperate cry for help, a voice against the void. At the same time, enemy soldiers closed in, their weapons raised for the final strike. Daniel spread his arms wide, blade dripping, his chest heaving, his voice low but fierce. "Then this is where we stand side by side." Lyra lifted her chin, her voice a whisper but filled with fire. "Yes, together." The storm of enemy fire came crashing down, the cliff shaking, the smoke rising like a curtain of doom. And in that moment, the human and the abandoned girl did not fear, for their promises bound them stronger than death. They stood, not as soldier and burden, not as savior and broken, but as two souls refusing to surrender. The cliffside shook under the storm of enemy fire, stones breaking loose and tumbling into the abyss. Daniel stood like a broken tower, his blade dripping, his body torn by wounds, yet his eyes unyielding. Lyra clung to the console, sparks flashing around her, the faint signal pulsing into the night sky like a dying heartbeat. The enemy advanced, their glowing eyes narrowing, their weapons raised for the final strike. Daniel tightened his grip, his voice rough, but steady. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." But Lyra shook her head, fire in her voice. "No, I promised I will not abandon you." Her words gave him strength even as his body failed, even as his knees trembled. He roared and charged, his blade cutting through the nearest soldier, sparks flying, steel clashing with metal. But they were too many, their shadows endless, their power overwhelming. A blast struck him across the chest, throwing him to the ground, his breath torn away. Lyra screamed, dragging herself toward him, her hands trembling. "Daniel." He coughed, blood staining his lips, his voice weak but fierce. "Do not cry. You must live. You must carry the secret. The war depends on you." Her tears fell like rain, but her voice hardened. "No, the war depends on us, together." The console flared, the signal growing stronger, piercing through the storm of interference. Up in the sky, beyond the smoke, a human fleet orbiting far above caught the desperate call. On the bridge of a massive ship, officers turned to their commander. "Sir, we have a distress signal, one human ID, one alien code, coordinates locked." The commander's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. "Then we answer, all ships prepare for drop." Back on the cliff, Daniel forced himself to his knees, his blade dragging against the stone. The enemy closed in for the kill, their leader raising its weapon high. But before it could strike, the sky split apart, thunder rolling across the wasteland. From above, human dropships descended, engines roaring, lights blazing, a storm of fire raining down on the enemy. Explosions ripped through the battlefield, enemy soldiers thrown back in chaos. Human soldiers leapt from the ships, weapons firing in disciplined bursts, their battle cries echoing. Daniel collapsed to his side, exhaustion finally claiming him, but relief in his eyes. Lyra pulled herself over him, shielding him with her body, whispering, "Hold on. They are here. You kept your promise, and now it is my turn." The battle above raged fierce, but the tide had turned. Humanity had answered the call, not for conquest, not for glory, but for one soldier and one abandoned girl. Together, they had lit a flame, and now that flame became a firestorm. Medics rushed to Daniel, lifting him onto a stretcher, their hands quick and precise. One of them paused at Lyra, confused. She is not human. But Daniel, weak yet unbroken, forced his voice out. "She is more than human. She is the reason we are here. She holds the key. Protect her." The medics obeyed without question, carrying both of them into the ship. As the dropship lifted into the sky, Lyra looked down at the burning battlefield. Her people had abandoned her, but humanity had answered her cry. She turned to Daniel, who lay pale but alive, his hand weakly reaching for hers. She took it, squeezing gently, whispering, "They left me because I could not walk, but you taught me how to stand." His lips curved into the faintest smile, his voice a whisper, "And together we will end this war." Above the planet, the human fleet roared forward, armed with the truth Lyra carried. Her secret, once silenced, now spread across command, a flaw in the enemy's design that could bring them down. The alliance that had once doubted her now looked to her for guidance. And beside her, even wounded, Daniel remained her shield, her strength, her promise kept. The war was far from over, but its course had changed, all because one human refused to abandon her, and one abandoned girl refused to give up. Together, they became the spark that lit humanity's answer. And in the silence after the storm, two promises stood unbroken. Not weakness, not abandonment, but hope.